Great time. And hopefully next year.
And maybe even some of us older owners hated it, for help. But I'm back.
Hey, fools. T here with another one, and this time I want to talk about what I believe is people's perception that Nintendo purposely limits their stock on, their products to create buzz, or to just to create the idea or the belief that something is rare, and to make people go out and buy it. And I don't only think it's a misconception, or preconception. I think it's a misconception. And I'm not sure what this is based on. I think it's based on the fact that Nintendo makes stuff that a lot of people really want to buy. And so a lot of times it sells out, but sometimes it doesn't. And I just think it's a convenient point of view for a lot of people when they're talking about this stuff, and it just seems random. Nobody said that, there was shortages when it came to the Wii U. There was plenty of stock for the Wii U. So I'm just confused as to why people think one way about one product of Nintendo and not the same for another product. Nintendo isn't Microsoft, Nintendo isn't Sony, but even Sony these days can't afford to do that kind of stuff. Where they just, order a bunch of crap, a bunch of stock for something, and then hope that it sells, and in doing so, risk losing a lot of money. I talked about the Wii U, but I want to start from the beginning. Kinda. NES is a different story because, Nintendo didn't know what the market was going to do. They hoped that they had a success on their hands, and so they kind of trickled it out. They had the New York launch of it, and then slowly trickled out throughout the next year. 1985 was the year that NES launched. Famicom was, I believe, a year before that. But the Western version of the Famicom, the NES, launched in '85, but it was a really small, tiny little launch. Because Nintendo was being safe. They wanted to make sure it was going to sell. There was no guarantee after the debacle of Atari that a video game console was gonna do well, and so it was a chance they were taking. So, they limited stock and the launch for that based on that. So that was different. But obviously it went astronomical, and by the time this SNES came around, they were a bit more confident. And, it was a different market back then. The video game market was a lot smaller. And so, you could launch a system with, 200,000 units and not run out or be okay for the most part. And so it was a different beast back then. Again, with the N64, I believe it was 300,000 they launched with. And N64 started off kind of slow and really picked up around late 97, 98 was when it really started doing well and, sold well. And there wasn't a whole lot of, shortages talk. A lot of people don't remember this stuff because they either are a lot younger and just started gaming, maybe the last couple gens. So that's why I wanted to, add perspective on it. And then you had, the Game Boys, obviously. I don't remember shortages with the Game Boys, maybe certain variants, certain colors. But that happens because you don't make a ton of stock of certain colors in different variants. Your core stock, your core color, or whatever you have the most of, that's just normal. That makes sense. And everything else around it is a kind of a limited type of deal. And so, the Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, these are things that all sold really well, and there was no stock issues because there was a confidence, there was a assuredness that it was going to sell. And Nintendo has reason to be worried about the market, worried about how the system is going to sell. NES did well. Super NES did really well too. Didn't sell as many, but it was still a very popular, probably Nintendo's most popular core console. And then N64 did pretty well, especially for its shortcomings. It sold like 33 million, I think, which was pretty well. And then the GameCube, which I think got a lot of things right, sold what, 22 million, and that didn't make a lot of sense because it, like I said, it got way more third party than the N64 got, more comparable stuff, and it sold worse. So at least when it comes to Nintendo, there's no guarantees, no matter, you know, what you do to get your product out there. There's no guarantees it's gonna sell. Like I said, the GameCube got everything right pretty much that the N64 got wrong, and it still ended up selling 10 million less, and that's crazy. And it's a very popular console among gamers. They talk about the GameCube like it was, you know, the bee's knees, but nobody was buying it. I was there. Nobody was talking about the GameCube. It was all about PS2. And for some reason, people think it was all about Xbox. You know, they talk about PS2 and Xbox as if they were on the same playing field. PS2 destroyed Xbox. PS2 sold more than GameCube, far more than GameCube and Xbox combined. Xbox original only sold 2 million more units than the GameCube. It was if the GameCube was a failure, so was the original Xbox. But people don't talk about it as if it was a failure. It had broadband online, it had Xbox Live, it had really good third-party support, a little bit better than the GameCube, and it still only sold 2 million more. So again, there's no guarantees in this market on success. The Xbox original got pretty much everything right. It didn't get as many Japanese games, but it still, I think, should have done better than 24 million. But people talk about it like it did 240 million or something, and that's not the case. So, and then, you know, so Nintendo coming out for GameCube was like, you know, they were wary. They were playing it a little bit safe, especially with the hardware. They decided to not go crazy in the hardware and go HD, and they just basically sewed two GameCubes together and made the Wii, and had a cool little gimmick, and it sold well. There was no guarantee that the Wii was going to sell well. I know it's in hindsight is 2020. So people are like, oh yeah, of course that was going to do well. There was that weird Wii remote and nunchuck thing that could have been a disaster. It just so happens that it wasn't. They played it really well in the market, Nintendo did, and it did really well. But it could have ended up doing worse than the GameCube, but it didn't. And so Nintendo got their swagger back with the Wii, and maybe they got a little bit too much swagger because they didn't market the Wii U. They didn't explain the Wii U to the market, and obviously it's Nintendo's worst selling home console at this point. And, you know, so when the Wii U came out, Nintendo was a bit more confident. So I think they had like 8 to 10 million units in the first year ready to go, and that came and bit them in the ass. Obviously, they barely sold more than that lifetime. I think Wii U sitting about 13.7 million or something right now. So that's you know, that's crazy. And then we get to the curious case of the amiibos. Even I at the beginning was like, come on with the amiibos, let's make sure you got stock. Why are you guys not with the stock? And I'm like, now again in hindsight, because hindsight is 2020, I'm like, well, of course they didn't make a ton of those things. Why? Because the Wii U sales were a disaster. Like, you're gonna make 10 million little toys for a console that is your worst selling console of all time, and you're gonna just go crazy on these little figurines that come out for games and work for certain games? Are you going to go crazy and mass producing those? No. And so shortages happened because they were being conservative, and they had every right to be conservative because the Wii U did not sell very well. And so, but for some reason, because of things like that, There were shortages with that. And with the Wii, I forgot to mention, I don't know why. There were shortages with the Wii for 2 years because Nintendo had no idea that the thing was going to sell well. They didn't know, especially this well. Even if they had an idea it was going to sell well, they had no idea the Wii was going to excel that way. Why would they? Coming off the GameCube, why would they be like, oh yeah, we're going to totally sell 200 million of these things? Coming off the GameCube, which they felt, and I felt, they did everything right, almost everything right. Maybe they could have did some more with the online, obviously, but you know, they got all the game. The games were there. I think, to me, the GameCube had weaker first party stuff, and I'll talk about that in my Wii versus GameCube video. But like they just had no idea that it was going to sell that well, and so of course they were going to be behind with shortages. But I think the Wii is when people started coming up with this misconception that Nintendo was doing this on purpose, and I just think that's weird because, like I said, coming off the GameCube, why would they think it was going to sell great when they just basically sewed 2 GameCubes together? There was no indication that it was going to sell that crazy, and even if there was, they weren't going to risk manufacturing a ton of these things and then having them not sell. It's just smart business. So I think that's one of that misconception of Nintendo purposely, creating shortages, even though that where they got the idea for that was wrong, for people to think that. And so you get, nobody said that for the Wii U, but they said it for the Wii because it's so crazy. And of course, that leads to like the NES Classic Mini, which I believed from the beginning. Was going to be a limited thing. And because it, again, sold so well, which Nintendo was surprised by, why wouldn't they be surprised by that? I mean, of course, a lot of people were buzzing about it, but, do you completely change your plan based on a little bit of buzz? I don't know if you can do that. If you risk doing that, because this was going to be a limited thing. I'm sure they never said that, but I always felt the NES Classic wasn't going to be something that was going to be around for. It was going to be limited because it was limited. You can only play 30 games for it, and it was only so far you can go with that. So it was limited by its own nature. So I wasn't surprised by them saying that they were surprised that it was selling so well, because for them it was just going to be a limited holiday thing. Again, they could have communicated that better, and that's one problem I've always had with Nintendo, is their communication. They've gotten a lot better in the last few years, but they still have this disjointed nature that I've talked about previously, that they need to fix. But I was not surprised by it. I'm one of the guys that really wanted an NES Classic. I was upset about it for about 24 hours, and then I just kind of moved on. It's like, well, it's not the games that I care about. I have all those games already, everywhere. I just wanted the device itself. It was a collector's kind of thing for me. And sometimes there's stuff I can find that I can collect easy, and sometimes there's not. So I'm just gonna chill and hope that I can find it at some point. But if not, I'm not spending $300 for one, that's for sure. I'll maybe spend $100 on it. I think that's reasonable. But I'm not gonna spend $300 from a scalper or whatever. But yeah, I think that's just. I think it's funny when people are like, "Oh, they do it on purpose." Like, who wants to limit their stock on purpose? You want to sell it. You want to make money, and limiting it, maybe initially for a couple of weeks to get people jazzed. That's one thing, but to go 2 years like they did with the Wii and say, "Oh, they did it on purpose," is just kind of stupid. Because you want to make money. You think Nintendo didn't want to sell 200 million of those things? I think the Wii could have bested the PlayStation 2 as far as sales, unit sales, but they just didn't have enough. You think they didn't want to beat PS2 and had the console that has the most units sold in history? Of course they did. Why would they limit that for some buzz and to drive people crazy? It just. Sometimes people say some silly stuff. If they think about it for 2 seconds, they realize how kind of stupid it is. And be like, oh, yeah, that's kind of dumb. So, and obviously, the Switch is selling really well. They're having trouble, keeping it stocked completely But there are from what I see anyway, there are regular restocks of this console. And, you know, the numbers just came out. It's what, sold 2.8 million or something in the first month. It's probably well over 3 million right now. And that's great. And that only happens because they're restocking the thing. Their initial push was 2 million for the month. And they blew through that, obviously. So that's because they've been restocking it regularly. You know, they sold they sold almost 1 million more units than their projections, and then their stock, because they were able to restock it after they realized that it was selling well. And yeah, I just don't know why people, you know, it's convenient. I guess it's convenient when you're angry, or you know, and some of these people are angry for other people, which is kind of strange, but it's convenient to think that they're doing it on purpose when you can't get what you want, I guess. So I never understood that thinking. Oh, they're limiting it, at least on this level. Maybe on a smaller level when you're trying to sell some little rinky-dink product, but on this level when you're selling a large, expensive consumer electronic, to be purposely limiting it when you need to make that money back. You need to recoup your R&D. You need to not upset the market to where people just like give up on it and don't care. And that's a dangerous game to play, and it just doesn't make any business sense, and no smart business would ever do that. It's just stupid. It's a convenient excuse for people to be upset, I think. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. You think Nintendo limits, or any company limits, their stock for buzz? I would rather have money in my pocket than buzz, you know, as a business. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for watching and listening, and I'll see you fools next time. Peace out.
Oh yeah, one more thing. Play Nintendo, fools.
Do.